Always so loud. All right, so welcome everyone to Figma Workshop number 2. Today we're going to be talking about high-fidelity screens. If you weren't here last week, my name is Dylan Nguyen. I do UX research and design. I graduated from UTD with my bachelor's and my master's, and I was an officer for the UX Club for a while. So if you've been around the organization, you've probably seen me around. And I'm one of your instructors for this workshop series. I'll allow my co-instructor to introduce herself.
Hi, sorry. My name is Sanjana Venkat. I was also in UX Club at Dylan, and I graduated from UTD last year. I work at JP Morgan, and yeah, I'm happy to be here to help you guys learn Figma with Dylan. He's going to teach today. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so before we get started with any material, I want to quickly go over our certificate system for this semester. A few people have been asking me about this, so I just want to kind of share information on it. If you didn't know, we do a certificate program for this course. It's pretty easy to obtain. All you really have to do is show up and learn. This is broken down to 2 criteria. So the first one is attending workshops. Um, you just have to attend 5 workshops. We've already done 2. We'll have 5 more. So just 5 total attendances, and this is going to be based on participation. So we're not just going to check the Zoom logs and see if you logged in for a few minutes. We're going to look through the Figma file at the end of class and make sure you were participating. You don't have to have 100% of it done, but just the majority of it so that we know that you're actually trying to follow along with us. And then, so that's the first part of the certificate criteria. The second part is going to be following along with classes and then building your own project in parallel. This is going to be pretty easy because throughout all of these courses, we're going to be teaching you all the skills you need in order to basically replicate the app that we showed you guys last week. If you didn't see it last week, there's a recording on YouTube. You can watch that and see the prototype. But basically, by the end of the course, you should be able to recreate that and make your own little changes here and there, whether that means like different design decisions or just like different colors or fonts or whatever. Just as long as you are building a similar app that tracks habits that we can tell that you have reached a certain level of mastery over all the different skills we're teaching you, we'll just have you guys submit that. So the way this will work is at the end of the course, if you qualify based on attendance, we'll send you a link to submit a project if you would like. And then once you submit that project, we'll look over it. If it checks off the certain boxes, then we'll send you a certificate. And this will basically just show off that you have completed our course and you've done the workload associated with it. And then you can post it on LinkedIn, put on your resume, put on your portfolio, and we'll be happy to see that happen. This was kind of a lot of the information. So if you have any questions about it, feel free to leave them in the chat and I'll try to go over them. Or if you want to ask them later, there is a dedicated questions channel on Discord just for the Figma workshop series. So feel free to leave them there. And then either Sanjana or I or an officer will try to answer that as quickly as possible. But I'll give you guys like 30 seconds in case anyone has an urgent question that they want to ask right now. Does the yesterday's workshop count as a workshop? No, yesterday's workshop is separate. So our Figma workshop series is going to be weekly. They'll all be online. Yesterday's workshop was just something that the UX Club was also doing, not associated with this workshop series. So the one from 2 weeks ago on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. was our first one. Today's our second one, and every week from now we'll have one. Hopefully that answered your question. And then if I'll give it a bit more time to see if anyone else has any questions. And then if not, feel free again to leave those on Discord. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. So just recapping what we did last week, we covered the double diamond. This is like the very basics of UX research and design. It's the methodology that most people use. It's how we go about doing that process and making sure that we cover all I'll cover all our bases and make sure we create a product that at the end of the day makes sense, right? We also talked about research and design roles. So who is actually doing each step of the process, how each of those handoffs actually look. We talked about uses for Figma. So how are we using Figma and its associated applications throughout that process and why we should actually learn Figma. And then Sanjana taught you guys what a low fidelity screen is and how to make a low fidelity screen. And at the end of the day, you guys should have had something that looks like what you see on the right side of the screen here. And we'll be working off of that today. And then lastly, I want to thank you guys for the feedback. We shared a feedback form at the end of class last week, and a lot of you guys filled it out, and we were able to actually look through every single entry and make sure that we are trying to improve as instructors throughout the course of this workshop series. So we do look at everything. We do really appreciate all the feedback, and we'll like this class will only get better if we get that feedback because we obviously don't have an outsider's perspective on things. So we'll be sharing another feedback form at the end of this class just so that we can get more of that. So, like I said, last week we covered the lo-fi stuff. Today we'll be covering hi-fi stuff. And then this course or this series will go on every single week from now on up until November 12th. And that November 5th class, that'll be over variables and that'll lead right into the UX Club's Designathon that's happening that weekend. So whenever signups for that go out, I really highly suggest you guys sign up for it because it's a great way to showcase your skills or just kind of like make sure you learned everything because you should at that point know everything you need to in order to participate and potentially win the design-a-thon. That'd be really cool if you guys did that. And then the weekend after that is HackUTD. And I know a lot of people like to go to HackUTD, participate as a designer, help their team out with designs and research. I think that's also a great way to test yourself and make sure you're applying your skills. Um, and with that being said, let's move on to the topic at hand, which is high fidelity. And you might be asking yourself, like, what is high fidelity? What is this hyphenated term that Dylan keeps on tossing around all willy nilly? I'm brand new to UX. I don't know what he's talking about. Well, great. For you, I am going to explain all that. Basically, high fidelity means realistic or lifelike. That is the most basic definition of that in terms of UX. And as an example, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen here, this is a screenshot directly from Spotify. So I just opened my Spotify app, I took a screenshot, and I sent it to Figma. On the right-hand side of things is a high-fidelity mockup that I created in order to recreate what I saw on Spotify. So all of these are individual components. I put them there by hand. And essentially, this is a very realistic representation of what the user would see if they open Spotify, right? That is, at the end of the day, what a hi-fi mockup is. And a point of clarification, you'll hear me and Sanjana use the term hi-fi and high fidelity, and then lo-fi and low fidelity interchangeably. You know, that is just there to clarify things in case you get confused, but they mean the same thing. And so this is a hi-fi mockup. And you might be asking yourself now, like, why would I make one of those? Why don't I just stop at lo-fi like we did last week? Well, there's a lot of different scenarios in which a more lifelike representation of what the user is seeing is going to be more advantageous for us to use, right? The first instance is if you're doing user research, for example, um, you're probably going to get more accurate results on how they feel about the product and how they might behave while using the product if the product looks more like what the actual end of the day product will look like, right? So if you're showing them screens with just a bunch of boxes on it, you're probably not going to get an accurate assessment of how they feel about the product as if you were showing them something that's more detailed and actually looks like what they'll see when using the real thing. The second case is when you're talking to stakeholders, right? And maybe you're showing off any design decisions, or maybe you're presenting a possible design change to people who are like project managers or directors, or maybe even CEOs, right? If you're showing them that stuff, then it makes a lot more sense to use something that's high fidelity and more lifelike and closer to what the actual product will look like. You don't really want to show them something that's lo-fi so that they ask you like what you've been working on for the past 5 weeks because they just see a bunch of boxes. And then lastly, this also is really handy when you're talking to developers because if you hand them off something that is hi-fi, there's a lot less guesswork for them, right? They don't have to worry about picking fonts. They don't have to worry about picking font sizes or icons or pictures or colors or padding or spacing or any of that stuff, right? Because you're handing it to them. All they have to worry about is translating your design decisions into code. Everyone knows like you can tell when something was designed by an engineer because it generally doesn't look great because that's like not their job, right? Your job is to make those design decisions and then just have them translate it. Whereas if you hand them something that's more lo-fi, then they have to start like guessing, and a lot of things can go wrong that way. So it makes a lot more sense for you to hand them off something that's very high fidelity. So now that we know why we like to make hi-fi things, let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. Um, Primarily, we're going to be turning something that's lo-fi into something that's hi-fi. So like I said, at the end of class last week, you ended up with something like this blue page that's like very basic and lo-fi, and we're going to turn it into something a little bit more detailed that you see on the right side of the page, right? If you weren't here last week, no worries. We have assets set up for you guys to start off with, so don't worry about that. And then we're going to be doing this by adding color, typography, iconography, pictures, and then other miscellaneous details. And then with all the skills that we go over today, hopefully you're able to get started on your own version of our product. So you can get started on earning that certificate by starting your own project in parallel with what we're doing here today. And again, that will just be another habit tracker, but with your own design decisions. So maybe you make slight changes here and there, but at the end of the day, it should be somewhat similar to our product, right? So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and hop onto the Figma file. There should be a link in the chat that gets posted in the next few seconds here. That'll be how you access the Figma file. It's the same link as last week if you were here last week. And if you don't have the password, it should just be Figma24. And then that should grant you access to what we're doing here. And I'll wait for everyone to hop in. Looks like more people are hopping on, so that's a good sign. And then once you hop on the left side of your page, on the panel on the left side of your page, there's a bunch of pages. So we'll hop on the one that says 10.8 Workshop 2 Hi-Fi Mockups. And I'll just give it a bit more time in case people are having trouble getting into it. If you're having any trouble, feel free to leave a comment in the chat, and then Sunjanil will try to help you out. But it looks like most people are able to access it, which is great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Again, if you're having trouble, just type in chat, and Sunjanil will try to help you out. First, can everyone find a box that says student name and just choose one, and then double click where it says student name and then type their name in. This will help A, distinguish your box from everyone else's so you know where to go to, and then B, we'll be able to help keep track of attendance based on this. And then if you want to change the color, like the fill color of your box, that'll also help you distinguish your box. So if you don't know how to do that, just select the actual box, and then where it says fill on the right hand side, just click on the colored box next to EO, 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 and then drag that color slider wherever you want it. All right. So yeah, so just make sure you're selecting a box when you do that, or else you might accidentally change the color of the page, which no worries.
I'm not able to change the name on the student name box.
Okay, so all you should have to do is double click on the student name box, and then it should highlight the word student name, and you should be able to type in that way.
Not doing that.
It's not doing that. Can you tell me what your name is, so I can find your cursor? Sorry.
Ninad Sudarsanam.
Okay, so you're over here. So when you're double clicking this, it doesn't allow you to type anything.
Yes.
That is interesting.
Are you able to can you click on any of the other text on the page and see if you can edit it? So can you click over here?
Yes.
You're able to change it?
Well, let me see. I'm able to change it.
Okay, that's fine. I'll put in your name for now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get started on...
SUDARSANAM is the correct spelling of my name.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So because of how our class is set up, it might be slightly difficult for you to follow along during specific times in the class. So I'll ask you to look at my screen for certain portions of the class, and then I'll tell you like when it's good for you guys to go back to your screen and like work on your own stuff. So with that being said, I'm going to ask that you guys look at my screen for a second here. So just hop on back over to your Zoom window and look at what I am doing. And I'll just kind of explain the layout of everything here. So As you can see, these are the example pages. We have the landing example page and then the home example page. This is what we're going to be essentially creating today. And you can see that we have assets over here on the right-hand side to get you guys started. And so the first thing we're going to do is change the background of this landing page, right? And you guys learned how to change the background colors last week, which is great. But this week we're going to do something a little bit different. So as you know, you click on the frame. So you click on landing here to get to the frame, and this will open up this right side panel. We're going to click on the color box next to fill, and you'll see that there are like 4 icons up here. The first one says solid, the second one's gradient, third one's image, fourth one's video. So instead of using the solid fill and changing the color that way, we're going to choose gradient. And this will pop up this like big gradient thing, and it'll allow us to make a gradient. And this can be linear, this can be radial, angular, or diamond. We're going to choose linear today because it's the simplest to use. And all you have to do here is just choose your 2 different colors that you want it to change between. So the first one, I'm going to choose like a nice like brown type deal. And then the second one, I'm going to choose a darker brown. So like that, right? And that's all you have to do. So now you can go back to your own screen and change the gradient on your landing page. If any of that didn't make sense to you, feel free to leave it in chat or just unmute yourself and I'll try to clarify.
How do I change the color of the app screen?
So you'll just you'll click on here where it says landing.
Yes.
And then you will go to the fill. Yeah, there should be a thing that says fill on the right hand side. And then you'll be able to change the color that way. Again, if anyone else is having troubles, feel free to speak up. It looks like most people are getting it down.
Not able to change the color of the landing.
You're not able to change the color. Do you have, by any chance, do you have, well, you have access to this file, so you should have student mode enabled. You're not able to, so if you double click on app here, are you able to like type in a new word?
No.
Yeah, I think if you have end access, then I'll work on that, Dylan. You can continue.
Okay. Then Sanjana will message you privately through the chat and make sure that's all sorted out.
Can I ask you to show me again how to do the gradient? I've done it before, but for some reason I'm tweaking right now.
No worries, no worries. So if you look at my screen again, you can see here that I clicked on the frame. And so this is all popping up. If I just delete the fill here, so this is where you're starting off. There's like a fill.
I see that.
On here.
Okay.
And then there's the second icon here is our gradient. And we'll click on that.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. I got it.
No
Appreciate
worries. All right. So once everyone has their gradient, we're going to do something called adding a style, right? Because when we have a specific color or a specific gradient that we plan to use throughout our application, which generally is the case because we want our apps to look cohesive and want them to feel like they're being designed by the same person, a lot of that comes down to color. If we're going to be reusing this gradient, we're going to want to save it as a style, right? And so I'll ask that everyone comes back to my page and just looks at what I'm doing here before you do it on your own. All right, so now that I have finished my gradient, I'm going to click on the gradient again and bring up all these details. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this plus button. And if I hover over it, it says new style or variable. If I click on that, it should open up this style page. There's also a variable tab. We're not going to worry about that for now. We're going to work with style. And I'm going to name this Dylan gradient. So when you do this on your own, you can just name it your first name gradient. Don't worry about the description. It doesn't really matter right now. If you were to make a design system, then it will matter. But for now, it doesn't really matter. And then you can look at the properties. This is just like what we have here. I'm going to click on create style. So if everyone can go back to their gradient and go ahead and do that, that would be great.
Dylan.
Yes.
Saying view only access, no edit access.
View only access.
Then I'll message to you privately in the chat about how to get your student account verified. I Are you able to open your Zoom chat to check that? So I sent you a link with directions about the student verification. I can open a workout room with you if you like.
Yes, can we do that?
Yeah, I'll be back though.
Yep, no worries. All right. So it looks like pretty much everyone has their gradient set up. If you have any trouble with that, feel free to drop something in the chat and I'll go back or just unmute yourself. But it looks like pretty much everyone has it. So that will be used later. We're going to move on for now, but we'll come back to that gradient or that color style. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the title of our application and then the tagline, right? So I personally don't love Times New Roman. I'm going to name my application. So in this case, it's called 365. You can name it whatever. And I'm also going to change the typography on here. So don't love Times New Roman. I'm going to change the font by coming to the right side panel. And you can just, you don't have to come to look at my page. You can just do this on your own. But if I am highlighting the app name, I can come over to the right-hand side, change the typeface by just going to the typography tab. I'm going to choose like Urbanist. And then I'm going to insert my tagline. The example tagline is like, whatever your goal will make it ours too. And then you can insert, whatever tagline you want. And then I'm, again, going to change the typeface of this because Times New Roman is kind of ugly. No offense. I'm just going to change it to Poppin. And then I'll change the font size a little bit just to make it fit on the page a little bit more. And then once you're done with that, we're going to do, well, actually, I'll just give you guys a little bit more time because it looks like some people are still choosing their typefaces, which is fine. No worries. Find something that really, really resonates with you, you know? I'll give it like 30 more seconds for you guys to find two typefaces and then insert whatever text you want. And then let me see if anyone is, okay, no one has left a message. That's great. Okay, I am going to count down from like 5, and hopefully that's enough time for everyone to have chosen their fonts. All right, so now what we're going to do is create something called a text style. I don't know if I explained it earlier, but there's going to be instances where you want to reuse specific details. So like with the color, you'll want to reuse certain colors throughout your application. The same goes for text, right? Let's say you have a specific body text that you want to use throughout your application. You'll probably want to just reuse a style instead of going in and manually changing each of those instances to the same style, right? And this is also helpful in case you change your mind. Like if I have this brown gradient all over my application and I decide one day that I don't like brown and I want to change it to like green, it would really suck for me to have to go through every single page of my app and change the color back to green. Whereas if I have this color style set up, I can actually go in and edit the color style and just change it that way. And then every time that I've applied that color style will automatically change. And the same goes for text. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose our subtitle. So in this case, whatever your goal, we'll make it ours too. We're going to choose that. And we're going to do a very similar thing to what we did with our color earlier. So we can do this. And this might be more helpful if you watch my screen first, just so that you know exactly where all the buttons are. So I'll give you guys a second to hop on over. All right. So you can see that I've selected my subtitle. And you'll go over to the right-hand side. Under typography, there's like these 4 circles and it says apply styles. We're going to click on that. And instead of searching anything, we're just going to click this plus button and it'll allow us to create a style. And again, I'm going to name it Dylan body font. And then don't worry about the description, but you can see this is like an example of what it looks like. And then you can just create style. And I see that some people are already creating theirs. So that's great. Everyone go ahead and create theirs.
Could you do that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I selected my, here, I'll go ahead and unlink that. I selected my body font here, or my subtitle here. I went over to the right-hand side of my page under typography. There are like 4 circles next to the word typography. If you highlight it, it says apply styles. I'm gonna click on that, and then I'm going to click the plus button next to the book. And then it'll allow me to create a style, and then I'll just name it my first name, body font, and then I'll click on create style after that. And I'll give it a little bit more time here. And just make sure if you're changing the color of anything that we are selecting the actual item that you change the color, or else you might accidentally change the page color. And then you'll be confused as to why your thing isn't changing colors. All right, looks like pretty much everyone has their body font ready. So we'll move on. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change the color of these 2 pieces of text just because I feel like the contrast isn't great. You don't have to do this. I'm going to change the text to white just to make it a little bit more legible. You can change yours too. And if you don't know how to do that, just select whatever you want to change the color of, go over to the right-hand side under fill, and just choose whatever color. And then that shouldn't take very long. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to adjust our buttons. And the first thing to do that, I'm just going to select both login and sign up. So I'm just going to do that by clicking on login, just the text part of it, and then holding shift on my keyboard, and then clicking sign up. That means I'm just selecting these 2 pieces of text. And I'm going to change their font too, because I think the standard font is kind of ugly. And this shouldn't take too long since we've gotten some practice in on doing that. I'm going to change the font there, and I should be ready to continue.
Dylan,
Yes.
how do I join the Figma?
How do you join the Figma? So there should be links in the chat.
Yeah.
And then if you click on that, you should be able to join. I think you had access earlier, so you should still have access now. And if it asks for a password, the password is just Figma24, no spaces, and the F in Figma is capitalized. I'll type it in the chat actually, because that'll be easier. All right, so everyone should have their button fonts chosen, right? So the next thing we're going to do is make these buttons a little bit prettier and a little bit more like the example. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to first change the radius, because I personally, I like pill-shaped buttons, not these like rounded corner rectangle buttons. I think they're kind of ugly. You might have a different opinion, but that is mine. And I'm the instructor, so my opinion is the best opinion. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to select the actual rectangle. And you can tell you're selecting the rectangle by looking on the left side of your screen, and you should have rectangle 30 or 31 highlighted, depending on which rectangle you chose. And we can change our radius, which is like how rounded the corners are. We can change that in a few different ways. The first way is just to put your mouse over the rectangle, and you'll see that like these little circles pop up near the corners. You can click on that and drag inward or outward to change the radius accordingly. So if I drag all the way in, it changes to 38. I can also, while selecting the rectangle, just go to the right side panel, and under appearance, there's like a bended corner icon, and next to it is a number. I can go in and manually type in the number that I want, or I can grab the bended corner icon and drag it to the left or the right to change my radius that way. So I'm going to do that with both of my buttons. I'm going to change them both to like 40, just so that they're pill-shaped, and I think that's prettier. I'll just go around and make sure everyone is able to do so. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. But it looks like most people have done it with at least one of the buttons, so that's cool. And this process is the same for the second button.
Can you go over that one more time?
Yeah, no
I think
worries.
I kind of made a mistake with mine.
Okay, so if I click on the rectangle and you'll know that you click the rectangle by looking on the left side panel and making sure it's just the rectangle that you selected. If you go into here, it'll start with like a so you click on the rectangle, and then if you if you put your mouse over the rectangle on the screen, you'll see like little circles near the corners. And if you put your mouse over one of those circles, it'll say radius and then a number. If you just grab that and drag it in, towards the middle or away from the middle, it'll change the radius accordingly. Yeah, so that's like the easiest way to change your radius because you can instantly see the results. And
Dylan,
yes,
how do you insert a text box in Figma?
how do I insert a text box in Figma? You can do that by either typing T on your keyboard and then just like clicking on the screen, or you can go to the toolbar at the bottom and there's a T. If you hover over it, that's text. Yeah. All right. So hopefully we all have our pill size or pill shaped buttons or whatever shaped button you want. We're going to continue and make them a little bit prettier. And we're going to do that by first, we're going to change the color of the top button so that so if you look on your example, you'll see that the top button is like filled in, and this kind of implies that it's a primary button, so the login in this case, and then the bottom button is not filled in. It's just an outline, and that kind of implies that it's a secondary button. So we're going to do the same thing on ours. So if we click on the top rectangle, we'll see that its fill is currently like D9, D9, D9. We're going to change that to white or some other color, depending on what your background looks like. Just make sure that it's contrasting enough. That should be pretty simple. And then once you guys have done that, we're gonna choose the rectangle for our sign up button. And we're gonna do something a little bit differently. We're gonna go to the right side panel and we're gonna add a stroke. And so under the fill section, you should see a section that's titled stroke with a plus sign on the right side. We're gonna click on that. And you should see that your button now has like a black outline. So in my case, since my top button is white, I'm going to change this black outline to white as well. I can just do that by using the color selector like we've done for everything in the past. And then under that color selector, you see that it currently says inside. There's a drop-down menu. You can choose center, outside, or inside. We're going to keep it inside, but I'd just like for you guys to know that's there. So you can put the stroke on the inside or outside of the actual shape, and that'll change how things look, obviously. And then next to the inside outside dropdown is a thickness selector. So you can choose how thick the stroke is, right? In this case, I want it to be thicker than 1. So I'm just going to choose 2 here to give it a little bit more body, a little bit more substance. Hopefully everyone is able to follow along there. And then the last thing I'm going to do, while still selecting the rectangle, is I'm going to go up to my fill section and I'm going to click on the minus sign, and this will erase whatever I have as my fill. So now my button is like see-through. Hopefully everyone was able to follow along. Looks like most people are right.
Make the button see through again?
How do I make the button see-through again? So I just select my second button, the button that I want to be see-through.
Yes.
And I go to the right-hand side, and there's a fill option. I'm going to click the minus sign under the fill option.
Thank you.
No worries. And now the last thing, I'm going to change the color of login and sign up just because I don't think this black looks great in contrast to the brown that I have going on. And also I don't have many things that are black on my screen. So I'm going to choose my login, and I can make sure I'm only choosing the text by just holding control before I click on it. You might not have any troubles with that, so ignore that. If you're able to select it, fine. But if you're having a little bit of problems, just hold control while you're doing this. So I'm going to choose my login, the text. I'm going to change the fill, but I'm not going to change it to a single color. I'm going to go in, and next to the word fill are the 4 circles that we saw earlier. If you highlight them, it says apply styles and variables. I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to find my gradient. You should be able to find your own just based on the color, but if you have problems trying to decipher yours from the others, you can just type in your first name, and it'll allow you to find your gradient. So I'm going to change it to that. So now my login is like brown, like a brown gradient that I have as my background.
How do I change it again?
So you just select the word login, and then you go over to the right hand side. There is a fill option. Next to the word fill should be 4 circles, and you'll click on those 4 circles, and then you'll choose the gradient that you set up earlier. Or if you don't have a gradient that's set up, just choose someone else's gradient. All right, and so we're going to just change the color of sign up so that it also contrasts from my background. And in this case, I'm just going to change it to white. So now our homepage should be looking a lot better. Looks like most people are following along, so that's great. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and work on our little app icon section. So if you look on the example above on the landing page above the title is like a little woman reading. Obviously, if you're making your own product, you can insert whatever icon you want. But I figured I'd save you guys some time and give you the asset for the woman reading. It's at like the bottom of your section. But first, we're going to make this rectangle into a more like glassmorphic type thing. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to choose the rectangle. So this is the rectangle above the title of your app. We're going to select that, and we're going to change its fill to white, just straight up white, just F, 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 F. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change the opacity. So we can do that by coming down to the color selector. So there's like an eyedrop tool, an icon like below the color wheel. And next to it is like a color selector to choose your base color. And then right below that is an opacity slider. So we're going to slide the opacity down to right around like 35%. And you'll see that the opacity of the rectangle changes. So now it's slightly see-through.
How do I do it again?
So we're going to select the rectangle, and then we're going to go into fill. We're going to change the color to white. And then next to the eyedrop tool, there are 2 sliders. One's a color slider and one's an opacity slider. And we're going to slide the opacity down to 35. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change the radius of this. I should have done this earlier, but we can do it now. It's fine. So just change the radius to be slightly rounded. I'm going to go about like 25 for my radius. You can choose whatever. You can choose whatever radius you want. I'm going to go with 25. And then we are going to add a stroke. So this is something we did earlier. Just go ahead and add a stroke to this. I'm going to change mine to be about, let's say like two thick. And then I'm going to change the color of the stroke to white, and then bring the opacity down to right around 20%. And you might be asking yourself, like, why does it look like the stroke is brighter than the fill? Because the stroke is a lower opacity. The stroke is like on top of the fill. So I guess in this case, it'd be like 55% opacity rather than the 20 that you currently see. So the stroke should be a little bit brighter than the fill. So now we have like our glassmorphic little section at the top here. And I'm going, someone changed the color of the background, of the page background, and not their thing. Okay,
Just
so yes.
sorry,
Yeah.
if you guys need a reference for all the settings, because there's going to be a lot of settings, I'm sending screenshots in the chat as well, so you guys can refer to that if you're not able to follow along. The 50%, the color, and that stuff.
Yep. I'm gonna look around here and see how people are doing. Looks like most of us have that set up. If you have questions, again, just leave them in the chat or just unmute yourself. I'm going to continue here. So we're going to grab this little woman reading. It's a PNG, so it has transparency to it, and we're just going to drag it up to our little icon holder, the rectangle up here. And again, like I said earlier, I don't have much black going on this page, and so I don't really vibe with the color of the PNG right now. So I'm going to change it by going to my selection colors. Do not choose fill. Because this is a PNG, if you choose fill, it'll just make the entire rectangle a different color. Go to selection colors below that, and I'm going to change this. I'm going to grab my eyedrop tool, and I'm just going to choose a color on my page. So I'll choose this like brown down here. I think that is a little bit more fitting to the app. All right, so with that done, we have most of our landing page done. There's a few more details on the example that we haven't gone over, but we'll come back to that if there is time. The last thing I'm going to do on this page for now is we're going to learn how to frame things, because sometimes you want to move this entire, like your entire login button, you want to move it at the same time, but it might be difficult if they're individual assets. So there are two ways to kind of like tie these two assets together, the assets being your text and the rectangle surrounding your text. The first way is to highlight both of them. So the login and then the rectangle 30. And then we can right click and then we can choose group selection. That's the first option. This is not something I would personally recommend, just because grouping things can make working with it in the future a little bit harder when it comes down to prototyping, or it comes down to auto layout or things like that, which we'll talk about in future classes. So right now, I'm going to suggest that instead of choosing group selection, you choose frame selection. And again, there's a keybind to do that shows up on the menu that you can do. So in this case, it's Control Alt G, but I'm just going to right click and choose frame selection. So make sure that you have both the text and the rectangle selected when you do that, and then do the same thing for your sign up button. And this is just like a habit that you should kind of get into to frame your individual components, because again, it'll make things easier if you just like want to move the entire thing at once, but then also if you get into prototyping and working with auto layout and components and things like that. All right, so with all of that being said, we're going to move on to our home page. And the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to adjust the color of our homepage. So there's like a wavy section on the bottom of your page. It's like dark gray right now. We're just going to click on that, and we're going to change the fill color to, you guessed it, our gradient color. So remember to do that, we just click on the section, we go to fill, we go to the 4 circles next to the word fill, and we find our gradient. You just type your name, or you can find it based on the color. So everyone's new little section should be their app color. Cool. Looks like most people are able to find it. And again, if you didn't set up a gradient color earlier, just choose someone else's gradient color. Right. And so the next thing we're going to do is I am going to change the font and color of the hello and welcome message. If you look at your example, the hello will say hi and then your first name. So I'm going to change it to Hi Dylan. And then I'm going to change the font to, let's see, I'm going to change it to Urbanist. Again, it doesn't really matter what font you're choosing. And then I'm going to change it to be a slightly smaller, because I don't think it needs to be that big. And then I'm also going to make it white so that it contrasts from the background a little bit. So just to recap what I did, I just changed the actual text to Hi Dylan. I changed the font, the typography, like the typeface, I guess. I changed the actual font size, and then I just moved it to the left a little bit, so that's left aligned. And then with the bottom thing, I'm going to insert our little message. So in my case, it says, let's achieve your goals together. And then again, it looks like it's a little bit too big for my screen. And instead of going in and manually changing everything, I'm going to apply our text style that we used earlier. So if I have this subtext kind of highlighted, I'm going to go into the typography tab on my right sidebar. I'm going to find those 4 circles like we've been using earlier, where it says apply styles, and I'm going to find my custom style. And it should just say first name and then body font. And then I'm going to adjust the size of the text box so that it fits on my page. I can do that just by finding the outline of the text box and then dragging that to accommodate what I'm using. And then I'm going to left align it. And I can do that by looking below the text style I'm using. There's like the align buttons that you'll find on Word and like Google Docs and now on Figma. I'm going to choose left align. I'll just line that up with my other text. And then the last thing I'm going to do is change the color to white as well. And you see that I'm using white a lot throughout my application. This is another way, like another instance where you could be using a text style, right? Or a color style rather. Like let's say I'm just setting all of this to be a color style that is white. That way, if I change my mind, if for some reason, whoever is in charge of me says like, oh, we can't use pure white on this application, we should make it like slightly darker than pure white for accessibility purposes or whatever. I can go in and just change that color style to be slightly darker than pure white, and everything that is white on my screen will change to that. And I don't have to go in and manually change every single instance I use white. All right, so now we're going to insert a profile picture. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to first create a circle. And we can do that by either typing O on our keyboard, or we can go to the bottom toolbar and find the shape tool. So right now it's a rectangle. If you go to the drop-down menu, it should have an option for an ellipse. And we're going to find that, and we're going to hold Shift before we do anything, and then we're going to drag out a little circle here. Holding Shift locks in your proportions as 1-to-1, which means like you're making a circle. The same goes for when you're using the rectangle tool, it'll make a square for you. If you don't hold Shift, it'll make like an oval. Or if you're really good with your mouse, it'll somehow make a circle. But yeah, so now we should all have a little circle action going on. Looks like most of us have it. And once we have that circle, we are going to click on the circle, and we're going to change the fill. So we're going to go to the fill option. We're going to choose the little color box. And then instead of choosing a solid or a gradient, we're going to go to the third option. The third option being image. And here you'll find an option to upload something from your computer. So I'm just going to upload a picture from my computer. If you have like a school-friendly like picture that you can use for a profile picture, you just upload it here. Or if you want to very, very, very quickly go find an image to use, that's cool too. It just has to be downloaded to your system. So let me go around and make sure people understand how to do that. Again, if you have questions or you need me to repeat that, feel free to unmute yourself because I might not be able to read the chat. But it looks like most of us are finding a picture to use. I can hear you guys frantically looking around your downloads, trying to figure out what to use because you weren't prepared for this, which is fine. All right, I'll give it another like 30 seconds because I did not ask you guys to bring an image in.
Can I ask you to show us how you made the circle perfect again with use control, or was it Shift?
It's yeah, just Shift. So when you have the Eclipse tool selected, hold Shift and drag out.
Got it. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right. I think most of us have our profile picture set up. If not, no worries. I'll give it another like 10 seconds. And again, if you're having trouble figuring out how to fill that circle that you have, just click on the circle, go to fill like you would with any color. But instead of color or gradient, we're going to choose a third option, which is image, and then it'll allow you to upload something from your computer. You can also, like, there's a way to do this with an image that's already on Figma, but we're not going to cover that right now. And now that you have your profile picture set up, we are going to add a little bit of flair to it. So we're going to, again, select that circle. So you should select your profile picture, and we're going to add a stroke to it. In this case, I want to increase the thickness of my stroke to like 4, or maybe even 5, just so that it's more visible. And then I'm going to change the color of my stroke to my gradient. And you guys should know how to do that by now. If you for some reason forgot how to do that, feel free to speak up so that I can remind you, because that is my job as an instructor. But it looks like most of us are figuring out how to add that stroke. And I think we are close to being good to continue. I don't see any questions, so I'll assume that you guys understand how to do it and you're just in the process of doing it. All right. So the last thing we're going to be doing today is making our buttons, right? So in the example, there are these buttons that you can click on every time you complete one of your habits. In this case, your habits being drink water, read more, and meditate. We're going to add those buttons to our page here. So the first thing we're going to do in order to create those buttons is we're going to make the actual button shape. So you can do that by just making a rectangle and putting it on your page. That should be pretty simple. I'm going to center it here. And I'm going to, there's no specific dimensions. You can choose your own dimensions, but I'm going to make it so that it covers just about a third of my remaining area. Or if I were to have 3 of them, they would cover the rest of my remaining space. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly round the corners. I know I said I like pill shape buttons earlier, but these, in this like specific instance, I don't think pill shape is necessarily appropriate. So I'm going to make it like a rounded rectangle. Hopefully everyone is following along with that. For some reason, Figma is very slow today, and I'm having trouble scrolling around. Yeah, okay. So it looks like everyone was able to make a rounded rectangle for their button. Oh my goodness, software is... Okay, cool. So now I'm going to do the same thing that I did to the icon holder with this button. So I'm going to make it like glass, right? So if you don't remember how to do that, we're going to come over to fill. We're going to change it to white and then bring our opacity down to right around 35. And then for this button, I don't think we necessarily need a stroke. So we're just going to leave it there and then not add a stroke. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to add a little section in the middle to house our icon, right? So we'll talk about icons in a second, but for right now, we're just going to add a circle to the middle of that rectangular button. So you guys know how to make a circle. We'll make a circle here, and we'll put it right in the middle of that rectangular button. And I'm going to make that circle white, just so that I can ensure some contrast between the circle and whatever is going to be contained inside of it. And remember, use shift if you want to ensure that it is a circle and not a rectangle, or not an oval. All right. And so once you have that down, I'm going to ask you guys to come to my screen again, because we're going to talk about something called a plugin really quickly. So if you're currently still working on the circle, just go ahead and hop over to my screen, because this will be kind of an in-depth explanation. So on Figma, there are things called plugins. If you've ever played like modded Minecraft, this is kind of like that, where you add a mod to make your experience slightly better, right? The same goes for Figma. There are a bunch of things called plugins. So the way this works is you can just right click on an empty space and you go down to the plugin option and you'll go down to manage plugins. So you can go back to your own page and go ahead and do that. So just right click and go to manage plugin, or go to plugins and then manage plugins. And in your case, you probably don't have anything installed. It'll probably be like kind of empty and you'll just have a search bar. So what we're going to search up is something called Iconify. And that is ICONIFY. So icon and then IFY. We're going to search that up and it'll pop up and you'll see that it's a plugin. It has 2.9 million users and like 17,000 likes. And we're just going to click on that and it'll bring up a larger description of the plugin. And you can like go to its link or whatever. And we're just going to go to the bottom right and it'll say run, and we're going to click on run. And then before we get into this, there's like a bunch of plugins to do a lot of different things, right? So in this case, Iconify is a huge icon library that I like to use. There's plugins to do things like check accessibility settings to make sure like your contrast is proper. There's plugins to like add usable text fields. There's plugins to just like do weird effects to your font or your typography or whatever. There's like a lot of different things that you can do with plugins, and this is just one of them. And this is the one I'm showing you today. So with Iconify, the main reason that people really like using it, you can see on the home screen, is because there is a library called Material Symbols by Google. This is part of Material Design. This is Google's design system. It's like an industry standard for people who aren't on iOS. There's a lot of cool icons in there, and they're all made with the same design language, right? Because they're made by the same artists. And there's a bunch of different collections like that on Iconify. So you can ensure that the icons you're using are not like all scrambled in terms of design language, because you can ensure they're from the same design collection. Obviously, you don't have to make sure they're from the same collection in order to make them look cohesive, but that offers a lot of functionality there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up 3 icons for our buttons here. In my case, it's going to be water is the first one, because that's the first habit I'm tracking. So I'm going to look up water. I'm going to find an icon that I like. So I like this teardrop type thing. And once I select on an icon that I think works for me, I'm going to come down, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page. And there's a few options for how I want to export this icon. I'm going to choose the color to be black because that'll help me find the icon. And then I'm going to change the height to 64. And with all that being done, I'm going to click on import icon. You can import it as a bunch of different things, but for right now, we're just going to import it as an icon. And that should import like on the right side of your page if you're having any trouble finding it. And then with Iconify, it's kind of weird because it inserts all of your icons inside of a frame. So you're going to have to move the entire frame. Some people get confused about this and try to just move the vector inside of the frame, and that'll just like cause problems. So just try to make sure you're grabbing the whole frame whenever you're working with Iconify. And I'm just going to drag that water droplet into my button into the center there. And then I am just going to highlight my entire button, and I am going to frame my selection. And then I'm going to duplicate it by doing Control D. So that just copy and pastes it basically. And I'm going to drag the second copy of it down below the first button. And then I'm going to duplicate it again by pressing Control D. And it should automatically move that second one below. In short, I'm just copying and pasting my whole button and dragging it below the first instance of my button, if that was confusing.
I see a couple people struggling. Make sure you're selecting the entire frame.
Mm-hmm.
So don't select just the icon. There should be like a big blue box around
And you can ensure that you're selecting the whole frame by looking at the left side panel. And it should be the entire frame that is highlighted. It shouldn't just be a singular thing inside of your frame. And then let's see how people are doing. It looks like a lot of us have our 2 to 3 buttons. Once you're
Could
done
you
with
show
that,
the duplication again?
yes. So if I have this highlighted, so again, this whole frame highlighted, if I just hold Control D, or not hold it, but if I click Control D, it'll copy and paste my button on top of my existing button, and I can just grab this and drag it downward. I can hold Shift to make sure that it only goes vertically. And then I'll put it there. And if I click on Control D again, it will make a third instance with the same spacing. It's the same thing as if you just do Control C, Control V, like copy and paste, and then just drag it down, but it does it a little bit quicker. So now that we have our multiple buttons, which I think most of us do, we're just going to go back to Iconify and find 2 more icons to meet our second and third goal. So you can go back to Iconify by right-clicking on an empty space, going to plugins, and then there should be an option for Iconify that pops up. And in my case, I'm going to find an icon for reading. So I'll look up book. I think this one works. I'll import it as an icon, and then I'll find an icon for meditation. And I think this one works. So I'll import it as an icon. And then all I have to do to replace the ones that are inside my frame is just click on my frame. And then if I go to the left side panel, I can make sure I'm just selecting the frame that contains my icon and not the ellipse and not the rectangle. And I can delete that. And I can do the same thing with my third button. Or I can just double click on my, I can like double click onto the actual icon and hope that it selects the frame. Sometimes it's a little finicky. So it's easier just to make sure you're doing it with the left side panel. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to drag my two new icons over to my buttons. And I know that we just came up on an hour for this class. That is right around how much time you guys should expect these featured classes to last. Oh, there's big icons over here. That's fine. So yeah, so feature classes will last right around an hour, probably between an hour and an hour 15, maybe sometimes even 30, just in case the topic is really extensive. So if you can, try to leave that time open because I know some people have commitments at like 9 and stuff. But yeah, once you have your 3 buttons, that is going to be pretty. Well, actually, if you want, you can change the color of your actual icons, your vector files. You can just do that by going to um, the frame that's containing everything, and then again going to selection colors and changing the color. Don't try to change the fill, or else it will be bad. I'm going to change all my little icons to my gradient color just because I have that on hand. And yeah, that'll be kind of it for now. If you have somewhere to go, feel free to go. I'm going to quickly put up a feedback form on the screen here. So if you go back to Zoom, there's a big QR code, and then there will be a link in the chat that either Varshini or Sanjana will post. So please fill out the feedback form. It is the only way that we will know what you think about the class, and that is how we make things better. And with that being said, that is about it from me for today. We'll teach you guys how to do more in-depth things in future classes. So thank you for coming. And then if you want to stick around after and work on either finishing this or if you have any questions that you want to bring up, feel free to stick around and I'll be here for a bit more time. Sanjana has to go, but I will be around for questions. But otherwise, thank you guys for coming.
You guys did really good. Saw some really good, really pretty designs. See you guys next class, and we're gonna learn how to prototype all this. So we encourage you to try to complete as much as you can. So follow the screens on your left to do as close as you can so you can be ready for the next class. And I will see you guys.
What's the homework by next class?
So there's no specific homework, but we do encourage you to just kind of repeat what you did in class and try to hone those skills so that you're able to do all this stuff on your own, and then B, you're ready to start prototyping on your own project.
Thanks.
No problem.
Thank you. I'll see you next class.
Thank
See you
you.
guys.
I had
And
a
again,
quick
yes.
question. Sorry.
No worries.
It was just so like how the text, how it says like let's achieve your goals together.
Mhm.
So like how together is underneath the words. I'm just wondering, like, is that like a manual thing every time? Like you have to press like enter to get like the words like underneath each other, or can it do that automatically?
So it can do it automatically based on your text box size. So if you come over to look at my screen again, if you click on this, the text box has like a certain size, right? So you can see that in the outline here. And if you just kind of like drag that in or out, it'll automatically try to fit the text within the text box size.
Okay. I think for some reason mine was going outside of it, but I might have just been moving it around too fast and it couldn't catch up.
Yeah,
But thank you.
no worries. Again, if there are any other questions, I'll be around for a few more minutes. And if you just want to like stay on the file and work on things a little bit more, that's also cool. I know some people stuck around after last class and oh, what happened here? I know some people stuck around after last class and really made their screens pretty. So that was cool to see.